Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Revolutionary Mothering, Love on the Frontlines. Edited by Alexis Pauline Gumbs, China Martins, and Maya Williams. Narrated by Diana Blue. Publisher's note. This audiobook refers to figures included in the print and ebook editions of the book. Preface. Loretta J. Ross. Imagine feminists of color in 1981 seeking to explain the complex matrix of domination and oppression we faced under Ronald Reagan's cowboy capitalism, yet feeling invalidated in our communities of color because our militant feminism called attention to sexism, homophobia, and violence. Simultaneously, we were devalued in majority-white feminist circles because we confronted racism, xenophobia, and colonialism in feminist thought and practices. The term women of color itself was only 4 years old, and we were 8 years away from Kimberly Crenshaw's introduction of the word intersectionality. As a young feminist in my 20s, I felt like we were frontline warriors without an articulated visual depiction of our nascent understandings about our ambiguous and interwoven positions. I needed a modern-day word cloud to represent my inchoate need for intersectionalized radical feminist theory, despite reading Toni Cade's brilliant Black Woman in 1970, which included Frances Beale's groundbreaking essay, Double Jeopardy, on the twin demons of racism and sexism. Audre Lorde and Angela Davis mercilessly attacked the underlying racism within feminism, describing it as reinforcing the patriarchal white supremacist system. Dolores Huerta was organizing farm workers in the 1960s in California. Geraldine Miller was organizing domestic workers in New York City in the 1970s, and Sandra Camacho also organized violence survivors in the 1970s. But I only learned about these women, and many others, much later, after we had a sufficiently large critical mass of widely accessible feminist scholarship and activism. Based on the fierce achievements of the women of color on whose shoulders we stood, as young feminists, we knew we had to prepare ourselves for when history needed us. We needed to find each other, and beyond that, find each other in each other. We usually caucused at the conferences of white women to overcome the huge geographical, political, and cultural gulfs between women of color and to try to make a speech that is heard. Infrequently, we had the resources to sponsor our own conferences, such as the 1980 Third World Women and Violence Conference at Howard University in Washington, D.C. But still, an illustration, a metaphor was needed for the project of coming together. Now, reimagine 1981, when two remarkable books, This Bridge Called My Back by Cherie Moraga and Gloria Anzaldúa, and Ain't I a Woman by Bell Hooks, erupted in our lives at nearly the same time. It is impossible to overstate their catalyzing impact. Feeling unmoored from the white feminist movement, women of color, especially Black women, anguished that we were constantly throwing the realities of our experiences up against their disbelief. It was as if we personally commissioned the writing of these particular books to affirm our lives and politics. These writers addressed the denial, fear, and self-delusion of some white women seeking power who saw feminism as an equal opportunity to oppress. Now I think it's called leaning in. For me, This Bridge Called My Back, in particular, created a stunning visual of a bridge that connects from one place to the other, in the literal and metaphorical sense of the word. The choice to be a bridge is a dangerous, often trod upon, and frequently invisibilizing decision. People seldom pay attention to the bridges they walk across because destinations, not means, are their priority. Yet, without these bridges, they couldn't go anywhere new. The bridge metaphor in the literatures of women of color speaks to our never-ending compulsion to connect people, spaces and places to emphasize the intersectionality of oppressions, and offer transformative library practices. When I teach about the importance of this bridge today, I draw a visual picture of how women of color may either choose to refuse to be bridges between their realities and white feminists, or between men and women of color, or between trans and cis people, etc., just as Kimberly Crenshaw illustrated our realities when she drew a traffic intersection on a blackboard with the race, gender, sexuality, and class streets intersecting. This bridge called my back offered the powerful testimony of women offering to be a bridge to new understandings among women of color, with also a nearly inadvertent impact on white feminists. Their purpose was to help build the movements of feminists of color for our strength and succor. Transforming white feminism was not their immediate goal, but was a welcome, unintended consequence. Now, 33 years later, along comes Revolutionary Mothering, Love on the Frontlines, edited by Alexis Pauline Gumbs, China Martins, and Maya Williams, an anthology on radical mothering that is directly informed by This Bridge Called My Back and the tradition of women of color feminism. This extraordinary book is not only radical in its redefinition of mothering, but also addresses the fact that humanity is interdependent, and we need each other to survive, in a way that Carol Gilligan has described. This is in direct opposition to the demonization of human interdependence used to justify dismantling of the welfare state. How do we get from a conservative definition of mothering as a biological destiny to mothering as a liberating practice that can thwart runaway capitalism? This book builds that particular bridge while also providing a bridge from the women of color testimonies of the 1980s and 90s to today's imperatives. This radical redefining of mothering as investing in others' existence moves far beyond biological determinism of the far right, or the libertarian dog-eat-dog individualism from Ayn Rand so eagerly embraced by the thinly disguised racist movement rebranding itself as the Tea Party, or the classic moral degeneracy tropes around motherhood embraced by most Republicans and blue dog and centrist Democrats. Their coalition gave us welfare reform. Remember? In contrast, the introduction to Revolutionary Mothering presents the radical concept of mothering creating, nurturing, affirming, and supporting life. Women are socialized, not created, to care for others and to expect others to care for them. Mothering, radically defined, is the glad gifting of one's talents, ideas, intellect, and creativity to the universe without recompense. Radical mothering is the imperative to build bridges that allow us to relate across barriers, the editors say. It is fortuitous, but perhaps not accidental, that I was asked to write this preface in 2014 at the same time we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of the conceptualization of the reproductive justice, RJ, framework. Without intending it as its primary goal, reproductive justice has significantly transformed the abortion-focused, pro-choice movement in 2 short decades by moving far beyond a singular focus on protecting abortion rights. Frustrated by the inadequacy of this limited vision for Black women, reproductive justice theory was developed by African American feminists in 1994 and subsequently popularized by many women of color through the leadership of the Sister Song Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective. The reproductive justice framework demanded that in addition to fighting for birth control and abortion, equal attention must be paid to the human right to become a mother and the concomitant and enabling right to parent our children in safe and healthy environments. Said most simply, reproductive justice is 1. The human right to not have a child, 2. The human right to have a child, and 3. The human right to parent in safe and healthy environments. In the words of Audre Lorde, we sought to give name to the nameless so it can be thought. As they become known and accepted by us, our feelings and the honest exploration of them become sanctuaries and spawning grounds for the most radical and daring ideas. Reproductive justice demanded our right to become parents in the face of sub-rosa race and class-based policies of population control and manipulation. We recognize that the purpose of reproductive oppression today is to facilitate the neoliberal economic system. For example, the myth of the undeserving mother of color, or poor, or immigrant, or black, or queer, used by the 1% and their puppet politicians, rationalizes the austerity justifications for destroying the social safety net and the transference of industrial production to other countries as part of the neoliberal reorganization of capitalism. Because of the immoral transfer of wealth from the 99% to the 1%, current economic and demographic crises force this white supremacist system to rearrange itself. By attacking abortion, birth control, and sex education, demographic demagogues coerce young white women to have more babies as a way to save Western civilization in general, or Christianity in particular, with the Duggars as role models, 19 kids and counting. By manipulating scientific developments like genomics and assisted reproductive technologies, they use science in racially deterministic practices, as described by Dorothy Roberts. By discrediting the motherhood of women of color, poor white women, queer mothers, immigrant mothers, etc., this turns maternal virtue on its head, as these bad mothers are held responsible for all the ills of society, from the Wall Street mortgage crisis to environmental degradation caused by climate change. Because our children, however mothered, are the product of morally impoverished mothers, our children become disposable cannon fodder for U.S. imperialism around the world, or neo-slaves in the prison industrial complex. Our children either protect or produce more wealth for the 1%. At the time of the birth of RJ theory and practice in that Chicago hotel room, we did not discuss that the radical claim of mothering as a human right was not only the province of biologically defined women, and that mothering, like gender, is not biologically determined but socially constructed. This may have been due to our activist rather than academic backgrounds. We were focusing on the policy implications of healthcare reform sans reproductive justice and how to put pressure on the Clinton administration. In looking back over the exciting developments of the past 20 years, I am not surprised that the forward-looking RJ conversations became open source code for other tectonic shifts in many quarters, including expansion of the conceptualization of mothering as a queer thing. Radical mothering does not seek to deny the critical role biological mothers play in sustaining humanity. As Alexis Pauline Gumbs says, not just when people who do not identify as heterosexual give birth to or adopt children and parent them, but all day long and everywhere when we acknowledge the creative power of transforming ourselves and the ways we relate to each other. Because we were never meant to survive, and here we are, creating a world full of love. In Revolutionary Mothering, Alexis says in her framing article, Black feminists audaciously centered an entire literary movement around the rights of Black women to reproductive autonomy in the biological sense, but also the imperative to create narratives, theories, contexts, collectives, publications, political ideology, and more. Revolutionary mothering makes mothering theory both lyrical and lucid in the tradition of Black feminist analysis, rather than the insular and specialized postmodern writing style that postures as original and radical theorizing today. In this latest manifestation of the ongoing articulation of reproductive justice, the concept of mother is less a gendered identity than a transformative, liberating practice, irrespective of historically determinist rigidities. Children are not individual private property, but they are also not objects through which we seek to achieve our political goals or address our emotional needs. To do so would violate children's human rights. This calls to mind the white anti-abortion protesters who frequent our feminist marches and abortion clinics, while they feverishly thrust forward their adopted Black children to establish their anti-racist credentials. They love to shout at Black women that they, as white, pro-life women, are the true saviors of the Black race from the genocide of abortion. I am so tempted to remind them that mothering is for the sake of the child, not for the sake of their political goals. But I refrain, thinking about how difficult that child's life already is when parented by an unconsciously racist mother. This anthology asks if we can use our powers as radical mothers to responsibly uplift and sometimes represent others, or conversely, to smother or diminish others for our own purposes. It is a radical act to nurture the lives of those who are not supposed to exist. Not supposed to grow old, Oscar Grant. Not supposed to speak up, Mumia. Not supposed to survive domestic violence, Marissa Alexander. Not supposed to walk across streets, Michael Brown. Not supposed to wear hoodies, Trayvon Martin. Not supposed to ask for help, Renisha McBride. Not supposed to play loud music, Jordan Davis. Not supposed to be old, Kenneth Chamberlain. Not supposed to be inside our homes, Katherine Johnson. Not supposed to shop for toys at Walmart, John Crawford III. The tragedy of our continuing genocide is that by the time this preface is published, we will have many more names to add to the list of martyred victims of white supremacy. Our mere existence is a subversive act. Rethinking mothering from a radical point of view leads to considering survival as a form of self-love and as a service and gift to others whose lives would be incalculably diminished without us. Sharing our strengths while honoring our weaknesses together is not a contradiction, but a way to make love powerful, the essence of this ambitious and theoretically futuristic anthology. August 2014. Introduction. Maya Williams. This book has followed me in my life as an exile, as a revolutionary, and as a mama. When Lex first shared her idea of a book about revolutionary mothering, inspired by This Bridge Called My Back, in 2009, I had just moved to Cairo and was a community organizer with Sudanese gang boys in the Cairene ghettos. These black boys who carried machetes, told quick stories about being ex-child soldiers, loved Tupac, played with my baby girl, and drew hearts and butterflies beside their gang signs on the pink walls of their community center. 2 years later, as China, Lex, and I were gathering the submissions, it was 2011, and tear gas rolled through the streets of Ground Zero for the Arab Spring. By this point, my daughter was 4 years old and learning new Arabic words for freedom, revolution, and army. From Cairo to the Sinai, from Berlin to Ecuador, from my daughter in diapers to her riding a bike without training wheels, I have come back again and again to this book. From Teresa's first day of kindergarten, her first fight with her best friend, the first time I had to explain racism to her, and how babies get in mama's bellies, I've had to learn to let go, to hold on, let her make her own lines rather than just following mine. She has learned to stand on her front lines, to read between the lines and to figure out herself how far she can travel on this earth and swim in the Red Sea. Even before I was a mama, it was mamas on the margins who shaped my vision of the amazing and heartbreaking possibilities of being a mama. The punk mamas who lived across the street from me in the valleys, they breastfed in ripped t-shirts, leather cuffs, and purple, blue, green hair. The Palestinian mothers I visited in the West Bank, who told stories of their toddlers hiding on the far wall of the house as they listened quietly to the Israeli military bombing the neighbor's home. The Congolese mothers who sung praise songs with their babes on their laps and shared their stories of being rape survivors. Some of the babies grew in their bodies from the militia's violations. Teenage black mamas who lived in the mostly forgotten parts of Minnesota and fought against the medical professionals for the right to give birth as they chose. Sudanese refugee mamas in the crumbling buildings and ghettos of Cairo waiting for years for an EU visa and a new life. The Egyptian Mama, on January 28, 2011, the day of rage, who had one child on her shoulder, another by the hand. She waved an Egyptian flag and faced down the police's tear gas and water cannons. No matter where I go in life, in this life of exile, revolution, and mamas, frontlines and daughters are what feed my life. This book came from a vision I had of mamas who believe in themselves and their children, in the future and the ancestors so fiercely they will face down the ugly violence of the present time and time again. I've spent so many nights working on this book while Teresa made her own books with paper, stapler, crayons, and glue. Both of us, in our own way, creating line after line about what is most important to us in this one delicate life. May this book give to others what so many mothers have given me, small glimpses of the revolution. Revolution ain't cute or tidy, and neither is mothering. Mama, you know that vision you have about mothering, the one you keep holding on to that helps you get through the pain, the sleeplessness, the disappointment, the heartbreak, the passive-aggressive letters from school. Maybe your vision was of being a mama with your fist in the air, with your baby on your back as you climb mountains and paint murals. That vision you had of the 3-year-old who would go to a protest, look at the line of cops and say, "Fuck the police." Maybe your vision is different. Maybe it was country roads and writing novels with your babe playing in the wildflowers. Maybe it was communal living and hand-to-hand combat training while your kid laughs at the serious faces that grown-ups make. Maybe it was a feeling of freedom, a feeling of openness, some place where you could really breathe. I don't know exactly what it is. What I do know is that revolution ain't cute, and neither is mothering, usually. But like our visions, revolutionary mothering is necessary and real and happening every day. You are necessary. We are necessary, and so are our children. On the organization of this book, Roots and Branches. Roots. This collection started with the intention to center radical mothers of color and marginalized mothers' voices at its very inception, not as an afterthought, but at the heart of personal experience. Although racial diversity is more often measured by the inclusion of a few voices of color within white-dominated media, we are a diverse collection centering on radical mothers of color with a few marginalized, queer, trans, low-income, single, and disabled white mothers in this anthology. We are writing these words at a critical moment as we are witnessing and participating in a resurgence of a civil rights movement led by Black youth and Black mamas who are taking over the streets, over traditional and social media, over the national conversations, and proclaiming, in the words of Alicia Garza, Patrice Cullors, and Opal Tometi, that Black lives matter. We are writing these words on the anniversary of the killing of Michael Brown and in solidarity with Brown's mother, Leslie McSpadden, who says that her son did not die in vain. We write in solidarity with mothers who must send their children out into the world, knowing that the powers that be would prefer their child not exist anymore. As writers and editors, we have brought our lives to this collection, our relationships growing with each other through organic means, video chats and mango smoothies, cafe meetings and emails. Like the mighty oak, not as old as the tree under which China sat while writing an early draft of this, but grounded and connected to the past and to the future, to the earth and to the sky. We have talked of mission, discussed each essay and word, worked in a kind of natural consensus built on formal inquiry and practice, where sometimes one or another leads while one or another is busy with life, our communication still the roots growing underground to hold us tight. We have worked to curate revolution, not perfection, love, which can be afforded, truth, which feels dangerous but necessary, and commitment, without which nothing can grow. Still, we lose the notes of what we wanted to say here. We lose the notes in our messy lives of increasing piles of paper and computer crashes. And then we remember again, for each other, reflecting back to each other as we work to edit our words together into one cognizant whole, or part of the whole that is not whole. What brilliant thing did Alexis say about our movement-building purpose? We are accountable when we are specific. We define mothering in a particular way as a radical and revolutionary practice, and we connect it explicitly to the feminist of color tradition, and claim we are building knowledge for radical mothering as a transformative practice in our movements. Some of the jewels found pouring through old transcripts. Also, that our wide net, it caught its own ocean, was something that Alexis wanted to quote China on. And editing is an act of love. Thanks, Jessica Hoffman, giving us parameters to guide us during that long time we discussed submissions in online chats and through computer screens. How exactly did Maya word that thing she said? That she says all the time about the importance of centering the more fragile, precarious within society. How this better supports each and every one of us to make an improvement, which will really make a difference. We never could find the podcast, but in an essay Maya wrote many years ago, she says that Black babies matter, which seems to foreshadow this very moment. Her essays on the effect of the stress of racism on infant mortality were groundbreaking. She remains on the cutting edge of revolutionary midwifery. This is where we want to work. Too many times we have seen what is called radical be something that not everyone could afford, not everyone was included. The underlying racism, white privilege, classism, as well as other systems of oppression, still not addressed. What has been called in some limited but powerful circles, like mainstream media and even alternative media, mothering, has been almost entirely white mothering, to the point where it needed not even be said. The word white, which dominates, calls itself by no name, no color, so much so that mothering can be code for white mothering. And we find this extremely dangerous. We find it important to counter that narrative in real, practical ways. China recalls how her writing progress as a marginalized single mother on welfare in the 90s, fighting to have her own voice included, her own experiences validated, and then finding out, with gains made in publishing for radical mothers, that still most single mothers, especially single mothers of color, were being excluded, has taught her the utmost importance of addressing white privilege and racism in publishing, and that white supremacy must be confronted. Systematic changes made, head first, named, called, and fought against in order to build the future we envision, crave, desire, and demand. White supremacy surely will not go away on its own. Branches. We organize the pieces into sections as a way to point to the conversation that we believe mothers are already having with each other, and to provide some evidence of the conversations the three of us are having about what is important to us about revolutionary mothering. We have used the organizing metaphor of lines because we are threading something together with you, pointing out lifelines and drawing connections piece to piece. Since this conversation has been going on for a long time, we open with an intergenerational introduction. This includes a framing piece by Alexis about how the ways feminists of color talked about mothering in the 1970s and 80s are relevant to the radical childcare and revolutionary mothering activism going on today. It starts with an essay by revolutionary ancestor June Jordan called The Creative Spirit and Children's Literature.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?